Louisville, Kentucky, 1964. A brash young boxer named Cassius Clay stood before a room of skeptical reporters, his animated expressions and rapid-fire wordplay keeping all eyes fixed on him despite the cramped, smoke-filled press conference room. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. The hands can't hit what the eyes can't see, he proclaimed, shadowboxing with exaggerated grace. I'm so pretty, I'm so fast, I'm gonna whoop Sonny Liston so bad they'll need to change the record books fast. Laughter rippled through the assembled journalists. In the corner, Liston's promoter whispered to a colleague loud enough for several reporters to hear, "Someone ought to tell the kid this is heavyweight boxing, not ballet." More chuckles followed. Even Clay's own trainers looked uncomfortable with his theatrical display. In an era when heavyweight fighters were expected to be stoic and intimidating, Clay's poetry and dance-like approach to boxing seemed not just unorthodox, but borderline foolish. Angelo Dundee, Clay's veteran trainer, watched silently from the back of the room. He had recognized something in the young fighter that these cynical reporters couldn't see. A revolutionary combination of speed, reflexes, and fighting intelligence that might just redefine heavyweight boxing. As the press conference ended and the assembled media dispersed, many writing leads for stories that portrayed Clay as a delusional showman heading for a humiliating defeat, Dundee approached his fighter. "They don't get it, do they?" Dundee said quietly. Clay's public persona dropped momentarily, revealing the intense, calculating athlete beneath the showmanship. "They will," he replied simply. "If you like the beginning of this story, hit the subscribe button now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this amazing story. Your support means the world to me." Over the following weeks, as the fight date approached, the skepticism only intensified. Sonny Liston wasn't just the heavyweight champion, he was considered by many to be the most intimidating force the division had ever seen. A human wrecking ball with massive fists and a criminal past, Liston had demolished former champion Floyd Patterson twice, each time needing less than a round to render his opponent unconscious. Oddsmakers installed Liston as a 7-1 favorite. Veterans of the sport worried openly about Clay's safety. Former champion Joe Louis expressed concern that the young challenger might be seriously injured by Liston's devastating power. The prevailing wisdom was clear. No amount of dancing or pretty footwork could save Clay from the inevitable collision with Liston's sledgehammer fists. The night before the fight, in a quiet moment in his hotel room, Clay sat with Malcolm X, who had become a spiritual advisor to the young fighter as he explored his growing interest in the Nation of Islam. "They mock what they don't understand," Malcolm told him. "Your speed, your style, these are weapons they've never seen before in a heavyweight. But more than that, your mind is what truly separates you. Liston fights with his fists, you fight with your spirit." Clay nodded, absorbing the words. What the public perceived as arrogance was actually unshakable self-belief, a conviction that he had discovered a new approach to boxing that would render the old, plodding heavyweight style obsolete. "Tomorrow," Clay said, "the whole world's gonna see something they never seen before." As dawn broke on February 25, 1964, few believed Clay's prediction. The boxing establishment, the media, and the betting public all expected the same outcome. Sonny Liston destroying the talkative challenger, silencing his poetry with brutal finality. They had laughed at his claims of floating like a butterfly. But as Clay prepared to enter the ring at Miami Beach Convention Hall, there was no trace of doubt in his eyes, only the serene confidence of a man who knew something the rest of the world had yet to discover. The atmosphere in Miami Beach Convention Hall crackled with tension as fight time approached. Ringside reporters typed preliminary notes reflecting the conventional wisdom. This would likely be a short, violent affair, ending with the brash young challenger unconscious on the canvas. When Sonny Liston entered the arena, The crowd's reaction was one of awed respect. The champion's physique, broad-shouldered, thick-armed, with fists that seemed disproportionately large, radiated destructive potential. His expression, as always, was impassive, revealing nothing but cold determination. Clay's entrance, by contrast, was a study in controlled chaos. He bounced on his toes, shouted predictions at ringside observers, and appeared to many to be masking fear with excessive bravado. His pulse was visibly racing, leading one commentator to suggest he was on the verge of a panic attack. "Look at him, he's scared to death," remarked one veteran boxing writer to his colleague. "All that talk about floating like a butterfly is about to meet the harsh reality of Liston's fists." As the fighters received their final instructions at center ring, the size difference became apparent. Though Clay had the advantage of height and reach, Liston's muscular bulk made him appear the more formidable physical specimen. The champion glared at Clay with predatory focus, while the challenger continued his manic movement and verbal barrage. When the bell rang to start round one, something extraordinary happened. Something that would force everyone watching to reconsider their preconceptions about heavyweight boxing. Clay didn't just move around the ring, he seemed to glide across it, his footwork so fluid it appeared he was barely touching the canvas. Liston, accustomed to opponents who either charged at him or retreated in fear, found himself swinging at shadows as Clay circled away from danger while remaining in perfect position to counter. Midway through the first round, Clay landed a sequence of rapid punches that snapped Liston's head back. The crowd gasped. The champion, never known for his hand speed, suddenly appeared sluggish by comparison. Clay's movements weren't just fast. They were precisely calculated, each shift in position, serving both defensive and offensive purposes simultaneously. By round 3, blood was visible beneath Liston's left eye, the result of Clay's stinging. That had indeed materialized, like the bee stings he had promised. The champion's expression had changed from confident to confused, then increasingly to frustrated as he continued to miss with his powerful but predictable attacks. In his corner between rounds, Liston's trainers urged him to cut off the ring, to trap the dancing challenger against the ropes where his superior strength could be brought to bear. But each time Liston attempted to corral Clay, the younger fighter would pivot away at the last possible moment, often delivering sharp combinations as he escaped. "He is floating like a butterfly," admitted the same ringside commentator who had dismissed Clay's claims earlier. "I've never seen a heavyweight move like this." By the 6th round, Liston was breathing heavily, his attacks growing increasingly desperate. Clay, by contrast, appeared fresh, his movements as precise as in the opening minutes. When the bell rang ending the round, the once invincible champion remained seated on his stool, his left shoulder injured from throwing and missing so many punches. "I can't go on," Liston reportedly told his corner. When the announcement came that Liston would not answer the bell for round 7, the arena erupted in stunned disbelief. Clay rushed to the center of the ring, arms raised in triumph, shouting to the press section, "I told you! I told the world! I talked to God every day. I knew through him I would be the greatest." As reality sank in, the boxing world was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had been wrong. The dancing, the poetry, the seemingly outlandish claims about floating like a butterfly, these weren't just colorful metaphors. They were accurate descriptions of a revolutionary approach to heavyweight boxing. Later that night, Clay would announce his conversion to Islam and his adoption of the name Muhammad Ali, changes that would prove as controversial as his boxing style. But in that moment of victory, as skeptics struggled to reconcile what they had just witnessed with their previous certainties, one thing was undeniable. The butterfly had defeated the monster, and heavyweight boxing would never be the same. The years following his shocking victory over Sonny Liston, Muhammad Ali refined and perfected the revolutionary style that had confounded his critics. His declaration that he floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee was no longer met with derision, but studied with fascination by boxing experts who recognized they were witnessing the evolution of the sport. Ali's approach wasn't merely about speed, though his hand and foot quickness were unprecedented for a heavyweight. What truly distinguished his style was its intellectual foundation, a deep understanding of timing, distance, and psychological warfare that transformed boxing from mere physical confrontation into a form of athletic chess. People focus on how fast Ali is, observed veteran trainer Cus D'Amato after watching Ali defend his title against former champion Floyd Patterson. But speed is just the delivery system. What makes him special is his mind. He sees openings 3 moves ahead like a grandmaster. Not everyone embraced the change Ali represented. Many traditionalists clung to the belief that real heavyweight boxing was about raw power and willingness to absorb punishment, qualities that Ali seemed to reject in favor of artful evasion and precise counter-punching. This philosophical division was exacerbated by Ali's increasingly controversial persona outside the ring. His refusal to be drafted into military service during the Vietnam War led to his being stripped of his title and banned from boxing for 3.5 years, prime years of his athletic life sacrificed for his principles. When Ali finally returned to the ring in 1970, many wondered if his unique style, so dependent on reflexes and timing, could survive the long layoff. He was now 28. Ancient by the standards of lighter weight divisions where speed was paramount. In his absence, a new monster had emerged in the heavyweight division. Joe Frazier, an undefeated champion whose relentless pressure and devastating left hook had overwhelmed all challengers. Where Liston had been intimidating, Frazier was indefatigable, constantly moving forward, seemingly impervious to punishment. Their first meeting, dubbed the Fight of the Century, took place on March 8, 1971, at Madison Square Garden. For the first time, Ali's butterfly style met an opponent who could not be discouraged. Round after round, despite absorbing punishing jabs and right hands, Frazier continued his forward march, gradually closing the distance that Ali had used to control previous opponents. In the 15th and final round, Frazier's persistence was rewarded when a thunderous left hook sent Ali to the canvas. Though Ali rose to finish the fight on his feet, the decision was unanimous. Joe Frazier had handed Muhammad Ali his first professional defeat. Critics who had never accepted Ali's revolutionary approach felt vindicated. "The butterfly got squashed," wrote one columnist. When faced with a fighter who wouldn't be denied, all the dancing in the world couldn't save Ali. What these critics failed to recognize was that the fight had demonstrated not the failure of Ali's style, but its resilience. Despite 3 years of inactivity, despite facing a younger, stronger champion at the peak of his powers, Ali had gone the distance, winning several rounds with his signature movement and combination punching. More importantly, the loss forced Ali to evolve further. He recognized that while his core philosophy of float like a butterfly, sting like a bee remained sound, its application needed to adapt to different challenges. Against pure punchers like Liston, constant movement had been effective. Against indomitable pressure fighters like Frazier, new dimensions would be required. Over the next few years, Ali added layers to his revolutionary style. He developed the rope-a-dope strategy, willingly absorbing punches against the ropes to tire aggressive opponents. He refined his clinching technique, using wrestling-like skills to control inside fighting. He became more economical with his movement, conserving energy while still maintaining his defensive superiority. By the time Ali faced George Foreman in the 1974 Rumble in the Jungle, he had transformed from a pure butterfly into something more complex and adaptable. Foreman, who had demolished Frazier twice with frightening ease, represented the ultimate test, a fighter who combined Liston's intimidation factor with Frazier's relentlessness, all powered by perhaps the most devastating punching power the division had ever seen. Once again, the boxing establishment doubted Ali. Once again, they would be forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about heavyweight boxing. Kinshasa, Zaire, October 30th, 1974. As George Foreman's massive frame collapsed to the canvas in the 8th round, Muhammad Ali stood over him, the realization of his vindication visible in his eyes. The monster, perhaps the most frightening puncher in heavyweight history, had been conquered not by superior power, but by superior intellect and adaptability. "Muhammad Ali has done it," shouted commentator David Frost. "The man they said was finished, the man they said was too old, the man they said couldn't possibly cope with Foreman's power, has regained the heavyweight championship of the world." In winning this seemingly impossible victory, Ali had proven that his approach to boxing, so often dismissed as style over substance, contained depths that traditional boxing wisdom had failed to recognize. The butterfly had not only survived, it had evolved into something even more effective. The Rumble in the Jungle represented the ultimate validation of Ali's revolutionary style. Against Foreman, he hadn't merely floated like a butterfly. He had absorbed tremendous punishment, adapted his tactics mid-fight, and ultimately turned his opponent's greatest strength into a weakness. In the years that followed, as Ali continued to defend his regained title against challengers of various styles, the boxing world gradually accepted what had once seemed unthinkable. The dancing, poetry-spouting showman had fundamentally changed heavyweight boxing, introducing an approach that valued intelligence and adaptability as much as raw power. Young fighters coming up through the ranks studied Ali's footwork, his defensive head movement, his ability to fight effectively moving backward, all techniques that had been considered impossible for heavyweights before he demonstrated otherwise. Trainers who had once insisted that big men must plant their feet to generate power now incorporated mobility drills into their training regimens. Even Ali's fiercest critics eventually acknowledged his contribution to boxing's evolution. George Foreman, transformed by his defeat in Zaire into a more thoughtful fighter and eventually a beloved public figure, would later reflect, "We all laughed when Ali said he floated like a butterfly. We didn't understand that he wasn't just talking about physical movement. He was describing a mentality, the ability to rise above conventional thinking, to see possibilities others couldn't imagine." In October 1980, an aging Ali faced heavyweight champion Larry Holmes, a former sparring partner who had absorbed many of Ali's lessons while developing his own effective style. Holmes dominated the fight, forcing Ali's corner to stop the contest after 10 rounds. It was a painful passing of the torch, but also a testament to Ali's lasting influence. Holmes's mastery of the jab, his fluid movement, and his defensive awareness all reflected elements of the approach Ali had pioneered. When Ali finally retired in 1981 with a record of 56 wins and 5 losses, the boxing world looked dramatically different than it had when he first proclaimed his butterfly philosophy as a young Cassius Clay. Heavyweights were now expected to possess not just power, but mobility, defensive skill, and tactical intelligence. The division's center of gravity had shifted from brute force toward a more complete fighting approach. As Parkinson's syndrome gradually stilled the physical grace that had once defined him, Ali's impact only grew. The phrase, "float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," transcended boxing to become cultural shorthand for combining artistry with effectiveness, for meeting force with intelligence rather than greater force. Perhaps the most profound vindication came decades later as sports science caught up to what Ali had intuitively understood. Studies of fight efficiency, punch absorption rates, and career longevity all validated the approach he had championed. Movement-based boxing that minimized damage while maximizing offensive opportunities consistently produced better outcomes than the trade-off mentality that had dominated previously. The laughter that had greeted Ali's early pronouncements had long since faded, replaced by reverence for a visionary who had seen possibilities others couldn't imagine. The butterfly metaphor, once mocked as poetic nonsense, was now recognized as a perfect description of the revolutionary style that had transformed heavyweight boxing. In the end, Ali's greatest victory wasn't any single fight, not the shocking upset of Liston, not the tactical masterpiece against Foreman. It was the vindication of his approach, his philosophy, his understanding that in boxing, as in life, intelligence and adaptability would ultimately triumph over raw power. They had laughed when Muhammad Ali said he floated like a butterfly. They weren't laughing anymore.